In today's show, the Blazers lose by 60. Again. It's time for the Blame Power Rankings. Welcome to Locked On Blazers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Trailblazers, your daily Portland Trailblazers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What up, world? It's your past first point guard and Trailblazers reporter, Mike Richmond. You are listening to another episode of Locked On Blazers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, available wherever you get podcasts and also on YouTube. Thanks for making this show your first listen. Coming at you each and every weekday, Monday through Friday. So make it a part of your daily routine. Make it your first listen and tell your friends to do the same. It's Locked On Blazers, your team every day. In today's show, what an opportunity. For the second time in a little over 2 months, we get to talk about the Portland Trailblazers losing by 60 points. 60. That's a 6 and a 0. That's the number that comes after 50. After a 50-point loss, you can lose by more than that. You can lose by 60 in an NBA game, and the Blazers have now done it twice. Twice in the year 2024. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about Scoot Henderson's historic plus-minus. Not in a good way, you might imagine, in a 60-point loss. We'll talk blame power rankings, too, and a little bit of news on Tumani Camara, who's out for the season, to end the show. Let's do what we do, though. Fastest recap in the West. With 9 minutes and 19 seconds left in the first quarter, 2 minutes and 41 seconds into the game, the Blazers continuing a long road trip in Miami. Ryan Rupert takes advantage of a bad pass from Bam Adebayo, gets out on the break and dunks it home, and Blazers lead 9-4 at the 9:19 mark of the first quarter. It didn't go great from there. Over the next 43 minutes and 19 seconds, they are outscored 138-73, and they lose 142-81. Excuse me, 142-82. 142-82. I mean, we don't need to really go into the game too much. The box score is that the Heat outscored the Blazers 45-21 in the second quarter. Blazers at halftime had 10 turnovers and were 1 of 15 from 3, and they were down 34 points. The game was over. Scored 40 points in the first half, gave up 74. They had 10 turnovers. The Heat had 10 made threes. Ball game was over, and then they proceeded to get their ass kicked in the second half as well. Particularly the fourth quarter, outscored 35-19 and turned an ass-kicking into an historic beatdown. But at least they led 9-4. They also had 5-0 in this game. 2 5-point leads in the first 3 minutes. They were playing. They really had it together until they hit that 3-minute mark. I think what this is really a referendum on is if only the Blazers had traded for Tyler Hero, they would have only lost this game by 49 points. I don't mean that either. What I mean, obviously, that's hence the laugh. But despite what Heat fans might think, this team is going to suck anyways. But they shouldn't suck like this. This is another level. This is historic. If you get beat, like if you get smoked, if you get beat and you lose by 38, it's a bad night. It's a bad night at work, right? It's a bad night at work. The Blazers almost doubled that. You lose by 30 in an NBA game, it's like, dang, you got rocked. The Blazers lost by 60 points, and it wasn't their worst loss of the year. The Blazers scored 82 points, and it wasn't their lowest scoring game of the year. Since 1960, there have been 9 60-point losses in NBA history. 9. Post-merger, when the NBA and ABA merged in the head of the 76-77 season. If you just start there, kind of like the more modern era of basketball, there have been 7 post-merger 60-point losses in NBA history. 7 since 1976. The Blazers have lost 2 games by 60 points in the last 77 days. That's hard to do. Basically, in the first 50 years of the modern NBA, 5 teams had lost by 60. In the year 2024, from January 11th to March 29th, the Blazers lost by 60 twice. And sure, the scoring boom and the level of threes, Miami made 21 three-pointers and took 39. It is a different sport than it was way back when. But it's not like a bunch of other modern era teams are losing by 60. This is unique to this team. This is the legacy of this season, is that this team lost by 60 twice. Twice. In this game, Scoot Henderson set an NBA record, minus 58 plus minus. Scoot Henderson played 41 minutes and 7 seconds, according to the official NBA box score. And during his 41 minutes and 7 seconds, the Blazers were outscored by 58 points, the worst plus minus in NBA history since they've been tracking it. Here's the thing. The Portland Trailblazers, the whole squad, were outscored by 60 points in 48 minutes. This is historic and bad news for Scoot Henderson. Like, this is bad news to have this type of trivia attached to your name. He's had a real struggle his rookie season, and this is the type of sort of box score hunting goofiness that people are going to remember about Scoot and say, but didn't he have a minus 58? I certainly got a text message from a friend about it. Another group of friends who we chat about NBA box scores often. Everybody brought it up, minus 58. It's bad news. It's bad trivia. It's bad stuff. Like, Scoot has been bad, and he was very bad in this game. Finished with 26-6, but it's like they lost by 60. To me, the larger point is that everyone wearing a Portland Trailblazers uniform lost by 60 points. The plus-minus really suggests that Scoot Henderson participated in a beatdown. Everybody sucked. DeAndre Ayton comes back for the first time in a couple games, plays 24 minutes, finishes with 18 and 8. He's minus 32 in his 25 minutes. Ryan Rupert, 26 minutes, outscored by 38 in Ryan Rupert's minutes. Delano Banton, outscored by 44 in his 30 minutes of action. Scoot's obviously the big one, right? He played the second most minutes on the team. 42 minutes for Chris Murray, and he was a minus 49. So, like, I'm not trying to tell you that Scoot was good. I'm not trying to tell you that this is an historic thing that will be remembered. What I'm trying to tell you is that this is much more reflective of a beat down. For me, the much more meaningful plus minuses are when someone is like minus 26 in 22 minutes of a game that their team won by 13. It was like, you only played half the game, you got outscored by 26, and the other half your team easily cruised. They outscored them by 30 something when you were on the bench. Like, to me, that's more meaningful. This is more reflective. Like, I'm not trying to apologize for Scoot or shoot him bail or anything like that. I'm just trying to tell you that the people who got their butts beat were everybody who wore the jersey. Scoot just has the unfortunate of being the one with the worst plus minus on the team, the worst one tied to his name. A trivia question that unfortunately will follow him probably for a long time, because minus 58 is a lot. If it only happens 7 times since 1976, but it just happens to happen to the Trailblazers twice in 2024, this isn't something that happens to teams very often. This is unique to this team and this group and this coach and this front office and this ownership group. Let's talk about blame. When you look like this, you need to talk about blame. Who is at fault for this? Because teams lose all the time. The Blazers don't have the worst record in the league, although they're chasing it. They're probably going to, I think if they really believe in themselves and don't bring any of their veterans back, which I can't imagine they will, hard-pressed to see Anthony Simons or Jeremy Grant or Malcolm Brogdon play again this season, because the Blazers are on a quest to lose a bunch of games, and they don't care. They don't care about the loss. I mean, I'm sure they would rather not lose by 60, but they don't, like the L, like specifically the losing to this game to the Heat is mission accomplished. That's what they're after. They want to have a worse record than the Hornets. They want to have better draft odds. It is, quite frankly, the right approach is to lose games, but the right approach can never be to lose games by 60 and be non-competitive and be like a thing that people are going to laugh at. That is not exactly the ecosystem that you want to exist in. Let's talk about blame. We'll do the blame power rankings in the second segment. First, let's talk about PrizePicks. It's daily fantasy made easy. How fun is that? It's the most popular fantasy sports app in America with over 3 million members. It's the easiest and most exciting way to get in on the action of your favorite sports and players. You just pick more or less on a 2 or more player stats projection, and then you can win some money. Listen, March is over. You're listening to April 1st show, but the biggest moment of college basketball tips off in April. So be part of the action on PrizePicks for both the men's and women's college basketball championship. That's next week. You can win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. You turn $10 into $1,000 with your picks on college basketball. Go check out make an entry today on PrizePicks.com or use the app. But first, make sure you download that app, and when you do, use Locked On NBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Download the PrizePicks app and use the promo code Locked On NBA for a $1 match up to $100 when you make your first deposit. That's PrizePicks. Pick more. Pick less. It's that easy. All right. The Blazers are uniquely terrible. You could say that. They've got a distinction as being uniquely terrible. This is bad news. There was an interesting thing that happened on Friday. The Blazers announced that Moses Brown, backup center, who hasn't been very good this year and has struggled in a variety of ways and is probably just not an NBA player. But he had been recalled by the Rip City Remix, which means that assigned to the Rip City Remix, which means heading into, as the Blazers continue one of the longest road trips of the season, matching maybe the most days on the road, but matching the longest stretch of games away from home. A team that is a little bit light on center depth sent a player under an NBA contract, as Moses Brown is, down to the G League. And you know why? Because the G League had a more important game on Friday night than the Portland Trail Blazers. It was more important for the Rip City Remix in the NBA G League to win their game on Friday night than it was the Portland Trail Blazers. It was more important for Moses Brown to go suit up and try to help the minor league team win because the NBA team is trying to lose. The Remix, in their inaugural season, were hoping to get a victory and make the playoffs for the first time. Would have been a nice little accomplishment. So they got Moses Brown in action. It meant more to the franchise that the G League team makes the playoffs, that the NBA team wins. To wit, in attendance courtside on Friday evening at the Chiles Center when the Rip City Remix are playing their game, Trailblazers GM Joe Cronin and Trailblazers, the steward of the Allen estate, Jody Allen, functioning owner of the team. I guess they call them governors, but it doesn't make any sense to me. The Blazers cared more on Friday night about their minor league team making the playoffs than they did about the NBA team winning the game because they're trying to lose. They're trying to lose. That's the point. Moses Brown wouldn't have helped. Wouldn't have made any difference. Might not even played. Because with DeAndre Ayton back in the lineup, that was the other thing it signaled as soon as they sent Moses Brown down, was DeAndre Ayton, who's going to return after a 5-game absence. Get back, baby. 4-game absence, I believe, actually. But, Ayton's back. He's going to play half the game. You're going to have Duop Reith. You can go small if you want. Ibubaji was still with the club. He got a DNP CD, did not play, coach's decision. The team that the organization wanted to win tonight was not the major league club. It struck me not as a problem, certainly not problematic, but there was a real irony of trying to win a G League game on Friday night in March and actively not worrying about trying to win an NBA game. Like I said, losing is for where the Blazers are, losing is good. It sucks that it's good. It sucks that it's prioritized. It sucks that the league incentivizes teams to lose, but they're doing the right thing. Losing by 60 is a different flavor, though. And it strikes me that when you get to losses like this, the thing that fans and media types want to do is point the finger. In general, I always believe that you are given multiple fingers, or many of us have multiple fingers, so you can point at everybody. So you can point at everybody. You could say, you did a bad job, and you did a bad job, and you did a bad job, and all of you doing a bad job together put them in this mess. But let's power rank it. Let's have a little fun. By power ranking, I mean who is most at blame, and then we'll walk down from there. We'll start. Usually, power rankings start at the bottom and work their way up. So let's start at the bottom. I think the bottom of this list, the least blame, goes to injuries and bad luck. The Blazers have had their share of that. They've missed the second most games of any team in the league, behind only Memphis Grizzlies in terms of games lost due to injuries. Their sort of core six of players, Malcolm Brogdon and Anthony Simons, Jeremy Grant, DeAndre Ayton, and the two youngsters, Scoot Henderson and Shaedon Sharpe, played a grand total of 4 games together. That's sextet, I guess. Sextet is what the word I'm looking for. That sextet played 4 games together all season long. They've just been injured. Rob Williams got injured right away. Malcolm Brogdon and Shaedon Sharpe are going to miss a big chunk of time. Scoot Henderson's been on and off the court. Anthony Simons got hurt on night 1 and missed the next 18 games. DeAndre Ayton missed a month. They've just been injured. That's not the reason that they're this bad, but certainly luck and injuries play a part of it. The bad luck and injuries play a part of it, certainly. As we work our way up the list to the person who deserves the next most blame, I'm going to say ownership, the people who own the team, the Allen estate that owns the team, and I'm going to put a big asterisk next to it as we work our way up. Let's talk some more about that in a moment. Second on my list, Chauncey Billups. I don't think he's done a good job this year. I think I've been very open about that coming into the season. I was a pretty big Chauncey Billups doubter. I like him. I like him from a media perspective. I think he's a really good interview, but I don't think he's been a very good coach. I think he was kind of just like very clearly a bad coach in his first 2 seasons, but there's a very different roster with a very different plan and a very and I was willing to say this is a season where he can prove what he's capable of doing one way or another. And it's pretty clear that he is not creative enough of an offensive coach to sort of get to give the Blazers an ecosystem where they'd have a better chance of being successful. The roster stinks. Like they're really light on talent. It's just like it is what it is. Like they just don't have enough offensive players to probably put together a good offense. They have had a bunch of injuries, which has even given an already team that was going to probably be a bad offensive team even less of an opportunity to do so. But I think the lack of creativity on that end, particularly, I think on defense, Chauncey Billups is kind of a fine coach. There's some stuff I don't love, but I think he's like fine on that end. On offense, they just lack the sort of creativity to do stuff, to make things easier, to put players in better opportunities to succeed. And my number one complaint about Chauncey Billups is I think sometimes he misdiagnoses the strength of his team and doesn't put players sometimes doesn't put them in their best spots, and sometimes actively puts them in situations and in positions where their weaknesses will be magnified. He's my second on my list. But the top of the list is the person who put the roster together. To me, the person who deserves the most blame for this season is Joe Cronin. They wanted to be bad. Like they wanted to be one of the 5 worst teams in the league. They may not have gone into the season openly admitting that, but it's a weird thing to go into the season being like, we're going to be bad, and it's part of our plan. But this was an intentionally young roster, a team that did not try to make upgrades at the trade deadline, either in terms of like trying to win more games, which would have probably been a mistake, or like just change the asset base. Perhaps that was just the market, and they'll do stuff this summer. But like you go in with this young group. I think about it like this with sort of how it all works in conjunction, and we'll talk about ownership again in a second. When the Blazers were like really hurt. Really, just everybody's hurt. Brogdon's hurt, and Simons is hurt, and Shaedon Sharpe is basically playing 40 minutes a night as the de facto point guard. The Blazers went out and found Jamari Bouye, who then, in the end of his 10-day contract, got 2 DNP CDs, didn't play in back-to-back games because he had been such a negative that Chauncey Billups didn't want to play him. So instead, he played Shaedon Sharpe like 45 minutes a night. That's on the front office for not being able to find a point guard that their coach trusts, or not just saying, listen, like, even though these minutes are horrific, and Bouye was really bad, he's got to play 12 minutes a night just for sort of reasonableness, right? And it over-indexed everyone, and Shaedon Sharpe looked worse for it because the ask was too big. The roster being bad is direct, is decisions, right? And you're trying to get young players and trying to build with young players and all of those things. I think also unequivocally, Scoot Henderson has been bad as a rookie. I think you can, depending on how you want to slice it or frame it or whatever lens you want to look through, you can say like, oh, but if you compare him only to rookies and only to this and only blah, blah, it's like he has been kind of fine. I don't think that's true. I think Scoot Henderson has been bad. And I think that's fine because teenagers are often bad in the league. But also I think he's been bad. like I think you could say, hey, young players struggle and he's struggling and he's a young player. But I don't, the Blazers on night one thought Scoot Henderson should be their starting point guard. They penciled him in as a starting point guard on the opening day of the season, and it didn't work out. They overestimated what Scoot was going to bring in year one, and I think that is a problem with the where they are. It might end up okay. Right? But this season has been a lost season due to injuries and a lost season due to coaching and a lost season due to some decisions by the front office. And that's when I want to go back to ownership. I know a lot of people point to ownership. This team can't win with the ownership they have. I don't really feel like they are high on my list. The person who built the roster and the person who coaches the players each night are higher on my blame power rankings. Cronin, Billups, ownership. Bad luck. It's my top 4. But ownership matters. I will say this. Ownership shelled out money to launch a G League team in less than a year. Ownership shelled out money to keep Jeremy Grant for $160 million. They could have made some other plays this year to be intentionally cheaper. Like they could have shed a little bit of money if they wanted to and been active about it. They're not going to be a tax team, and a bad team shouldn't be a tax team, so can't really blame them for like not, quote unquote, not going into the tax. That would just be like poor roster planning, right? But I don't necessarily see the ownership as a problem, but I will say this. A team more committed, an ownership group, more committed to winning may have made changes by now. And I don't think firing the coach really help or change anything. And I don't think firing the GM midstream would really help or change anything. But if you look at where they are and the sort of just like, well, we'll see what happens. And if there's no, Joe Cronin was promoted from an interim role to the permanent role without an interview, right? They didn't have an interview process. I think he's been okay. I think there's been some stuff that I just straight up would not have, that I didn't like that he's done. But I think like for the most part, he's been like a C-level executive with some upside. It's like a C- maybe. I think Chauncey Billups is a pretty bad coach. I think that's pretty obvious. A more active ownership group might have said, we need to make changes because we need a direction. We want to put guys in an ecosystem that helps them not lose by 60 points because while losing is okay, losing in a development situation where you're getting your ass whooped every 77 days by 60 points is probably not the best ecosystem for an incredibly young team to grow in. And you could argue, and I think this is the argument you would be making, and hence the asterisk, is that a ownership group that was a little more committed would have been more aggressive to change the direction. Not that I think changing the direction necessarily solves anything, but it would be, you are more likely, and shout out to my man Tetz for making this point, you are more likely to let things go bad when you are less invested. If you are more invested, you're more likely to fix the problems as they come up. That's your blame power rankings. Let's talk a little bit of news and where the Blazers go from here to close the show. Join me there. Join me in that third segment. First, though, let's talk about Fire TV from Amazon. It's your destination for sports, for live games, highlights, in-depth analysis. Fire TV offers amazing viewing experiences with smart TVs, as well as the Fire Stick that you can plug into your dumb TV that provides access to millions of movies and TV episodes, as well as free live TV. Whether it's the opening weekend of baseball, which has come to an end, so we're into the early season, the second series of the baseball season, or the college basketball tournaments, you're going to want to have Fire TV. Plus, Fire TV recently created Fire TV channels to deliver a constant supply of the latest videos from your favorite sports brands for free. That includes all of us at Locked On. The Locked On Sports Today feed, which is a 24-hour feed of the Locked On shows all over the country, covering the biggest stories from every single league, is right there on Fire TV. So Fire TV lets you dive into everything you want from analysis to highlights and more. Keep up to date on all of the world of sports, including with the help from us from the Locked On Network. Check out Fire TV channels on Fire TV and Alexa devices. If you haven't, check out Fire TV. You should. Trust me. To learn more, visit amazon.com/LockedOnFireTV. Locked on Fire TV. That's amazon.com/LockedOnFireTV. One more time because I messed up the URL. Amazon.com/LockedOnFireTV. All right, still a pass first point guard. I'm still Mike Richmond, and you are still listening to Locked On Blazers. Blazers had a little bit of news over the weekend. Tumani Camara, his season is done. Dang it. Against the Atlanta Hawks last Wednesday, Tumani Camara sustained a fractured rib and a small laceration of his kidney, and he is shut down for the remainder of the season. That's into the final, now 8 games of the year. Final 8 games of the year, no Tumani. In the grand scheme, you just want Tumani Camara to be healthy, right? That's the number one thing you want, is him to be safe and healthy. And when you fracture a rib and it cuts a small laceration of an organ, that is a scary thing. That sounds terrible. You just want to be healthy. In the sort of more macro world that we live in, like, it stinks because Tumani was one of perhaps the bright spot of the entire season. And now we're going to power rank bright spots to the season. No, that might actually be a show for another day. Honestly, little positivity power rankings. But with no Tumani Camara, you just get what has become the problem with this team all season. The challenge for this team all season. Problem suggests that they have some control over it. Choosing who's on the roster and who's in the game and how you'd run an offense, you have choices over that. Health, you don't really have much choice over. Sometimes dudes get hit in the ribs and they hurt themselves. It's like you don't have it. But the challenge of this team all season, and why in a lot of ways it's a lost year, is because you just haven't had guys play together enough to see what it looks like. You haven't had, as I mentioned, the sextet of sort of your core players that you need to make decisions on, right? With Ayton and Jeremy Grant and Malcolm Brogdon and Anfernee Simons and Henderson and Sharp, right? You haven't had the opportunity to sort of see all of those guys play together, how the pieces fit, different combinations and what it might look like and what a rotation might look like and yada yada yada. You just haven't had opportunity to do that. And add Tumani to the list now. It's 8 games at the end of the year. It's not in the grand scheme of like data collection. It's not that big of a deal, but it's just been the challenge where they've been at all year, is that they just haven't had a roster that has been healthy and together enough to learn about what they have. And that makes the next part so challenging. Because this summer, they need to make some big decisions, right? Like they have, as I mentioned on a previous episode last week, they've got 11 guys under contract. They got 3 more non-guaranteed deals. They've got 2 draft picks in the first round, another 2 in the second round. They're pressed up against, we're within about, $6 or $7 million of the tax line. So they probably need to get cheaper. They need to decide how many of the rookies they're going to bring in. They're going to need to decide how to maybe, what they want to do with the backcourt moving forward, what they want to do with the forward rotation moving forward, where they have a bunch of like interesting role player types, but no one who's grabbed the reins as really valuable. I mean, I think Tumani is clearly the best of the sort of young wings, but you need more than one to move forward. And they just don't know what they have, and that's out of their control, right? Like there's some other stuff that I think is within their control, hence the blame power rankings. This is out of their control. But it's also the reality is that they just don't know. So they head into the summer needing to make big decisions, right? I think it would be a mistake to just sort of like run it back and say, hey, there's a lot of internal development that has a chance to sort of get you there, and we believe we can grow forward with this group because as much as we struggled, we were extremely young, and we're going to bet on everybody getting a year older and a year better and a year more familiar with the system, and we're going to move forward like that. Like, to me, that would be such an incredible cop-out on what a rebuild earnestly looks like. And what a rebuild earnestly looks like is that you can do all of the logical things the Blazers have done. The first year of the Crone experiment included a season-ending injury for Damian Lillard, and they tanked. They got rid of a bunch of money on the books. They basically just shed salary and took back nothing of like major value in return. They just shed salary, basically salary dumped some folks, traded for a pick that became Jeremy Grant, I guess. I guess they traded CJ McCollum for what became, if you believe in the transitive property of trades, Jeremy Grant and Chris Murray. But like year one of the Crone experience, it was the right thing to do to tank. Year two, I think you could argue like that team was just not very good. And then when they weren't very good, totally punting on the final 10 games of the year was the right thing to do yet again. This year, they go in with an extremely young team, a team that's just like not going to be capable enough to be competitive in a very good Western Conference. I know some people out there kind of squint and say, this team could have made the play-in if. I don't think that. I do not think that. I think they could have been perfectly healthy this year, and they still would have finished something like 13th in the West. But I think it's defensible in the first 2 years. It's even maybe a totally reasonable thing to do in year three. But because of where they are, they've set themselves up heading into the future where they don't really like trying to be mediocre again next year would be a mistake. They actually need to be bad again into the future. And that's the hard part. They need because they haven't hit on draft picks yet. Shaden Sharp might be good. Scoot Henderson might be fine, but like, you don't know because you don't know if you've hit on draft picks yet, because you just kind of need to continue to pile up assets to have it, more chances to get better. And the challenge is, you have to do that now with very little information. And the challenge of the rebuild is to look in the mirror this summer, look in the mirror this offseason and say, this works, this doesn't work, here we go. Kicking the can down the road, even with as little data as you have, would be a mistake. This summer forces them to make hard decisions. And Tumani Camara is just another reminder of the unfortunate situation they've been put in. But time is a finite resource. Being patient in a league where players are under contracts that are for 4 years and less has diminishing returns at a certain point. Patience is valuable up until a certain point, and then you are over the waterfall. And the Blazers have to figure out whether they can get things right before they're over the waterfall, before they've waited too long, or patience has bit them in the butt. They have been patient to this point. They have been unlucky to this point. This summer is incredibly important for reshaping what's next. And guess what? Right here in the program, we will try to make sense of it, talk through the logic, and sort through the nonsense. If you got Blame Power Rankings, email me, lockedonblazerspod@gmail.com, or share them below in the comment section if you're watching on YouTube. That's going to do it for today's program. I appreciate you listening. We got fun stuff lined up the rest of the week. Tomorrow evening, the Blazers play, this evening, April 1st, they play the Orlando Magic in Orlando. We'll recap that game, and I want to talk about Orlando's development path. They took a long time to get where they are, but where they are looks like where the Blazers want to be. Absolutely. We'll talk that Orlando game and the pitfalls, the warnings, and maybe the value of taking the Orlando Magic path. And then later this week, Chris Manning from Locked On Cavs is going to join the program, and we're going to talk about the development of Darius Garland, a young guard who really struggled as a rookie and then put it together to become an all-star while still on his rookie contract. He is the person that many folks point to as Scoot, a positive outcome potential for Scoot. So we'll talk about how Darius Garland did it, what he looked like as a rookie, and how he got to where he is now. Fun shows. That's what we do. 5 days a week, wherever you get podcasts, and also on YouTube. I appreciate you listening. I'll talk to you soon.